You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 158. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers. Today, you get Tim and I. No conversation with other people, but we hope that this will be a conversation with you. If you've been listening to the conversations that we've been having since September with different leaders, you know that the past month or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, I've been giving you a couple of questions at the end of the episode to help you bring our conversation into your life and leadership. So that's what we want to offer to you today. A couple of questions to say goodbye to 2020. We all want to do that, and help you reflect on what's up for 2021. So with that, let me remind you, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/podcast, and you'll want to look for episode 158. So Tim, what is our first question?
Well, Sarah, as we were thinking about this time together, we actually asked the question, what's gone well over the 2020 year?
Now,
what's going well?
Now, before you think, are Sarah and Tim out of their mind? What's gone well? No, this is intentional. So one of the things that we said has gone well for us is that we spent a significant amount of time at the end of 2019 planning for 2020. And then most of our plans ended up getting changed. And why I say that went well is because we had done the planning, we knew where our focus needed to be and where we wanted it to be. And yet, as circumstances around us continued to change, both in terms of COVID and then the racial unrest in our country, we were able to adapt to that. And I think that we did that well.
I do too. So that's one of the things I would agree with you, is that what went well for us was adaptability. We were able to keep our focus, but to be able to offer what we had to offer as things around us changed. So I like that, adaptability.
What else has gone well?
Well, we had more than 52 podcasts and blog posts.
There's a reason I'm tired. I'm kidding.
And in fact, I think we've had over 60 podcasts or something close to it.
Yeah, there were a bunch of bonus episodes that were sprinkled throughout the year when we had something that didn't quite fit in with the theme that we were working on at that moment. But as I think back to the beginning of the year, we really started with episodes around courageous discipleship, and then through Lent, we invited folks to step into the arena and asked a series of questions, really guiding people in strategic ways to think about who they are and how they're leading. And that was when the pandemic hit and we went into stay-at-home orders and things started to change.
Well, one of the things I like, Sarah, that I think's gone well is that with each of the courageous discipleship and stepping into the arena and even other places where we had conversation over the year, we really tried to help people be courageous in their leadership. Even when they faced uncertainty, to step toward the uncertainty, and even when they were maybe afraid or to face the fear. And I thought that's gone really well with what we've been doing.
Yeah, and to me, part of that points to two things for me. One, the anti-racism conversations that we had both on Facebook Lives and Zoom meetings, and you also wrote about on the blog, but also the last 3 months of the year where we had conversations with different leaders. Part of what we heard over and over again from them was how they were doing that, or how they struggled with that, but then did it anyway. And so the vulnerability that they showed and the courage that they demonstrated, part of what I began to hear back from folks who listened to the podcast was, thank you. I recognized I wasn't alone. And I think that was part of the need, the unspoken need that people had this year, was to recognize I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in what I'm feeling. I'm not alone in what I'm experiencing. I still might not have a clue what I'm really doing, but I know that I'm not alone in that either.
So as we made plans and shifted, one of the things that I liked, and maybe that's the reason I think it went well, is that we paused and did a little Bible study in the summer. We focused on Matthew and we focused on John.
Yeah, and there were a couple of reasons for that, but I think we had planned on taking a pause anyway. At least in my mind, we had planned on taking a pause, because part of what I recognized is all of the logistics of putting together a podcast, you need to take a break from every once in a while. And I was at the point that I needed a break. And so we were able to continue to offer something, and at the same time, not do the extensive weekly podcasts that we had been doing. And
that would be another thing I would say that has gone well for us, is the work that you've put into this podcast. I'm grateful. You do all the producing, editing, directing, and much of the writing. And hey, I'm along for the ride. That's really gone well.
Well, thank you for that. That's not what I was fishing for. What I was really pointing to was the acknowledgement that there are rhythms of work and rest that we all need to acknowledge. And I think as I reflect on 2020, that's something that has been critical for folks. And I think that's gone well for us. Are we ready for question number 2?
Sure. I think a good question would be, what have you learned about yourself and others?
So let's start with, what have you learned about yourself? So for me, part of what I've learned is I'm sitting here with my phone and my Post-its and my planner in front of me. Guess what? There is a big mirror held up to me this year that said, yeah, I like plans, and I don't like plans being changed. Can I get an amen? And yet, at the same time, I recognize that as much as I don't like any of that, I totally understood the necessity of it. And if I'm really honest, there were a few things on my calendar that I was glad that it still happened, but it happened in a different way, because the energy of being present in that situation, to me, always outweighed the actual event itself.
Well, Sarah, one of the things I learned about myself is that I can learn new things. We had to step into some new ways of doing things because of a pandemic, but I'm learning new ways just by being on a podcast or writing blogs. And even though the focus never changed, I've actually done things I've never done before. And that I appreciate that.
In that same line, part of what I learned about others, and I think this is also about myself, is, and I kind of knew this already, this wasn't isolated to a 2020 learning, but I tend to be out in front of folks in terms of technology. And so when folks were like, Zoom, how do we do Zoom? What is this thing called Zoom? What do you mean we need to go on Facebook Live? I was like, yeah, we've been doing that. We had already experienced that and could very easily adapt, going back to your word, what we were doing in different ways to meet what was happening in the time. And another thing that I've learned is I truly am an introvert. As I watched my friends and family and listened to some of them hunger for being with people. Of course, I missed being with people. I mean, we all need people. That's a given. But the energy of being with people that gets drained from me really came into focus for me this year because of the pandemic. And I think I saw how much more friends and colleagues are extroverts and what they needed. And I was like, yeah, no, not me. I'm perfectly fine in my humble little abode.
Well, but listening to you, I would say that I'm an introvert too, but I did miss some of the people that I would have opportunities or the practices. Because one of the things that I learned about myself is that I actually can get along without having lunch with people, and I can get along without having face-to-face meetings with people. But I didn't realize how much I appreciated those or liked those kinds of interactions.
So can I go down a little strengths tangent, maybe? I think this was the conversation that we had with Barb Fillion on the podcast. And we've both known Barb for, over 10 years. Listening to her talk about woo and how much she enjoys meeting new people and the conversations of, I'm going to say it this way, working the room and connecting with lots of people and recognizing, I think it was Julie, but it was also Beth who pointed to the depth of conversations and the depths of relationships. That's what I'm hearing you say. And in strengths language, to me, that's the difference between the woo talent theme and the relator talent theme. Yes, I absolutely, positively missed the events, the interactions, the things that would have happened with the people that are closest to me, because there's a depth of relationship there. The things that were, I'm going to call them the meet and greets and, the work the room type of things. Yeah, didn't miss any of those.
I didn't miss those either. Another thing I learned about myself, well, I actually knew this already, but it came at the place of me stopping to talk about it and me starting to do it. And that is, I began to exercise every day. And in fact, as the pandemic came, I started walking a few minutes every day, and then it got up to an hour every day, and then it got up to even more than that every day, to the point where I set some goals that I'd not done before in terms of my own health and weight, and now have pretty much focused on how that works for me. But I got to tell you that part of the reason for doing that wasn't the pandemic, but it's because we talk so much about that on these podcasts that I needed to start modeling the things I'm talking about. So I learned some things about me at those points, and again, I'm grateful for what I've been learning.
Okay, I'm going to say this next one quickly, and then we're going to move on. Patience.
Well, you're not talking about me.
Tim, you are one of the most patient individuals that I know. So yes, I am talking about you. But again, I think this was a learning, watching others respond and then recognizing, oh, wait, I am being way more patient than a lot of folks are able to be. And Tim, you have said this to me over and over again, and most of the time I think you're saying it so that I will be patient, but that's another story. Yeah, learning patience and practicing patience is something that has been an important part of this year.
Well, Sarah, you work with me, so to work with me, you have to have patience. That's just a given.
So, what did we learn about others?
I wish I could make a long list of positive things, and these will turn out to be positive. But one of the things I've learned about others is that we really want to go back to the way things were before.
Yeah, change is hard.
And I don't know that that's a negative thing, but I do think that if we don't recognize how we continue to want to go back, we'll never step into what we can live into. And I think that's the reason I've seen people do that. I've seen people long for what was, but have also made the shifts to move into what we don't even know yet, but are willing to take those steps. And I think that's a very positive thing.
Yeah, I think how I'd say that one in terms of learning about others is part of what I learned and recognized is how much nostalgia is present, especially in the church, but also in our political systems and everyday way of life. And when nostalgia is driving decision making, we have a hard time innovating and moving forward. And at the very same time, one of the other things that I've learned about people is that we can change quickly if we want to. I mean, it was a Friday that we announced we're not going to have in-person worship, and by Sunday, people had figured out, yes, let me just acknowledge, with long days and long hours and lots of headaches, how to do worship on Facebook, how to stream a video on YouTube, how to record something and send it out to people. And I mean, that was a night and day switch, and it happened quickly. No, not everybody did that the first weekend, but we changed pretty quickly, all things considered.
So you're saying, and this is what I saw, and this is the way I'd say it, we're adaptable if we want to be. We can.
Yeah, there's that wannabe part.
And there's a place within us that, and I'm saying this more for me than I am for others, but I think it works for all of us, and that is we get comfortable in living, and if something begins to disturb our comfortableness, then we have to decide whether it's good or whether it's something not so good, and then how are we going to respond? And really, life is about adaptability. And part of the struggle that we have, even with our living or our leading, our being in the church, is that we continue to seek to be comfortable. And one of the things I've seen over this past year is that people stepping out of that comfortableness or the comfort zones and adapting to what needed to be. Our struggle is we try to make that comfortable.
Yeah, and that's where growth happens, is when we aren't comfortable. When there's some tension there, that's how we grow. And so I would say we've grown a lot this year. If we've truly been present in what 2020 has offered us. The last thing that I would say, and this is, again, going to sound negative, but I'm going to partner it with one that is positive, and I hope that will carry on into 2021. And we hit on it with the last two, the if we want to, how much our personal preferences and our individuality can overshadow focusing on the collective good and focusing on the common good. I saw over and over again this year how easy it was for people to say, here's what I want to do, and lose sight of how that might impact others. And we saw that in the pandemic. We saw that in the racial unrest. We saw that in the ways that congregations navigated through that. And if I'm really honest, that breaks my heart, because I don't think that is who we are at our core. And I'm going to partner with two things. On the opposite side of that, I saw how resilient people are and how committed people are to their communities, to their neighborhoods, and to caring for one another, from delivering groceries to leaving meals on people's front doors to doing pastoral from the porch, through glass windows. All of those things were examples of caring for and recognizing a community need, recognizing when our kids were hungry and didn't have the school meals, how the church stepped up and said, we'll be that place. You come to us and we will make sure that you get fed. And so please hear me. There are two sides to that. And both of those things were present. I don't think that I realized how much individuality, I don't know another way to say that, was present in our world until this year. And I hope that that won't continue, but that the resilience and the focus on the common good in our communities will continue to be fostered and facilitated as we continue to live and lead together. Stepping down from my soapbox.
So you ready to go to a bonus question?
Sure. What's our bonus question?
For whom or what are you grateful?
You and our listeners. That one's an easy one for me.
I'm grateful for the people that listen to us on a regular basis. And I'm also grateful for the people who haven't found out about us yet. And partly because I think the potential of this medium, the way we're using the podcast, is a wonderful way to learn and to grow. How many times have I told you over the last year that, man, I wish I had something not only like podcasts, but the material, the substance of what we're doing. I wish I'd had that when I started in ministry. Ministry would have been, my leadership would have been different and better. And so I'm grateful for the kinds of things we've been talking about and the people who are going to benefit just from what we're learning and sharing. I like that.
The other group of people that I'm grateful for as it relates to the podcast are the people who willingly took time out of their schedule and participated in conversations with us to be able to share with you all. And that's going to continue into 2021 with a slightly different bent. So as we move into 2021, that's just in 3 days, we'll be there from the time that this episode drops. Tim and I had a conversation about a different question, and the question went something like this: what do courageous leaders need to know, do, or understand? And from that, we identified 12 different qualities or attributes that are going to guide us through 2021. And each of those 12 qualities will be a monthly theme. So we're going to start in January with courageous leaders know and understand their purpose. And so we'll start with a podcast episode, and then we have 3 conversations throughout the rest of the month with different leaders and different angles around purpose. So one focuses on understanding and knowing your why, and what does that really mean? And another one is about how someone is leading from their strengths to focus on their purpose. And another one is how do you stay focused on your purpose? So that gives you an idea of where we're headed in 2021. And then in February, we're going to focus on relationships. And I'm not going to tell you anymore because Tim and I know ourselves well enough that we start to get into these types of experiences and say, wait, before we can talk about that theme, we need to have conversations about something else. So look forward to 2021, a monthly focus around one big topic that will come at it from 4 different angles. Tim, anything that you want to add as we wrap up this episode?
Well, Sarah, part of what we talked about is who you are is how you lead. And so that's really what our focus will be about. I was thinking about an image that might draw everything together about what we've been doing and the people with whom we're listening. And whether it works or not, it's just where my mind is right now. A few weeks ago, there was an image that came out across social media. I think it was even in the news reports. There was a doctor in full gear in terms of the protective equipment, embracing an elderly man who was by himself. He had COVID-19. Yeah, he's ill with the virus, but he's alone, and the doctor's embracing him. What was interesting about that, it's not the embrace, but that there were people who were surprised that the doctor would do that. And what I want to say, and kind of wrapping up, bringing 2020 to a close, is that what really grips me is that that's the way we want to be. We want to embrace you. We want to put our arms around you and help you know that you're not alone, that we're here to provide care and compassion, the insights and resources you need to be a courageous leader. But we don't want that to be a surprise. We want that to be the normal thing. And so that when we talk about it, it's not so much that it's unusual, but it becomes the way that all of us are living and working and responding to one another. So I guess that was a long way of just saying we care about you, and we look forward to the next year and being with you.
So with that said, let me remind you once again that you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/podcast. And for 157 podcasts, I have ended every episode, I believe, with "Now go lead a movement of Jesus followers." And what Tim just pointed to, and one of the shifts that we're making, is from, at least for this next season of the podcast, what you'll hear me say each week is, remember, who you are is how you lead. Bye for now.